My sister hires Nephew as wedding photographer, refuses to pay him. Hiring a family should come with a paycheck, but this sister thinks otherwise, and I'm here to tell you why that's a huge mistake. You see, when money and family mix, things can get messy. And today's story is a perfect example of how good intentions can spiral into major misunderstandings. We're diving deep into a scenario that'll make you question just how free family favors should really be. Imagine this. You're a young photographer, building your career, investing time and money into your craft, and then one day, a family member approaches you with a request. Hey, can you photograph my wedding? Of course, you say yes, because it's family, right? But what if that family member assumes you'll do it for free? What if you assume there's going to be a paycheck involved? And what happens when those assumptions collide on one of the biggest days of their life? Well, that's exactly what happened in this story. So let's dive right in. Meet Jake, an aspiring photographer with a passion for capturing life's most beautiful moments. His camera is his pride and joy, and he's been building his skills for a while now, taking every opportunity to practice and improve. One day, Jake gets a call from his aunt Sarah. Now, Sarah and Jake have always had a close relationship. Holidays together, family barbecues, the usual, but they've never really crossed paths when it comes to business until now. Sarah's big day is coming up, her wedding. It's a day she's been planning for months, every detail meticulously arranged, and she wants someone she trusts to capture it all. Who better than her talented nephew? Jake, of course, is honored. This is a huge moment, both for him and for Sarah. He knows how important these memories will be, and he's eager to contribute. Plus, it's a great opportunity for him to showcase his skills as a wedding photographer, a role he's been working toward for a while. But there's one thing Jake assumes from the get-go, that he'll be compensated for his work. After all, weddings are no small task. Hours of preparation, shooting, editing. It's a job, plain and simple. But Sarah, well, she has a different view. To her, this is a family favor. Why would she pay someone from her own family to be part of her special day? Surely, Jake would be thrilled to have the opportunity. This is where the misunderstanding begins, and it's about to take a sharp turn into conflict. Let's get to the heart of the matter. Jake was pumped when Sarah asked him to shoot her wedding. Finally, he thought, a real opportunity to showcase his talent in a high-stakes environment. He's been into photography for a few years now, and weddings are one of those gigs that can really help you build a solid portfolio. He knew this would be a great addition to his resume. Not to mention, he had just spent a chunk of his savings upgrading his equipment, his camera, lenses, and even lighting gear. He wanted to ensure he could capture every magical moment of Sarah's big day with precision and quality. So, in the days leading up to the wedding, Jake was hard at work. He researched the venue, scouted locations for the best shots, and practiced different techniques to make sure he was ready. He even scheduled a few trial sessions with friends, honing his skills under various lighting conditions to get everything perfect. This wasn't just a casual hobby for Jake. This was his career in the making, and like any professional, he expected to be paid for the time, effort, and expertise he was about to invest. But then, the conversation about payment never came. Jake thought maybe Sarah was just busy with wedding planning and hadn't brought it up yet. He figured they'd have a conversation soon. After all, it's a wedding and budgets are tight. But as the wedding day drew closer, Jake started to feel uneasy. Was Sarah assuming he was doing this for free? Could she really expect him to spend an entire day, plus countless hours in post-processing without any compensation? Jake was torn. On one hand, he loved his aunt and wanted to do something special for her. On the other hand, he didn't want to set a precedent where his work wasn't valued, especially by his own family. It wasn't about the money per se, it was about being recognized for the time and skill he was bringing to the table. But when he tried to bring up the subject with Sarah a few days before the wedding, things went south fast. Now let's take a closer look at the relationship between Jake and Sarah. Growing up, Jake had always admired his aunt. She was the fun one at family gatherings, always cracking jokes and always ready with advice. She had supported him when he first picked up photography as a hobby, even buying him his first beginner's camera. So when she asked him to shoot her wedding, Jake felt like this was a way of giving back. It was an opportunity to show her how far he had come. But what Jake didn't know was that Sarah had a very different perspective on this whole situation. In her mind, Jake was still her nephew, the kid she'd watched grow up, the one who had always been around to help out. She didn't see him as a professional photographer. To her, this wasn't a business arrangement, it was a family favor. She thought that by asking Jake to photograph her wedding, she was giving him an amazing opportunity to showcase his work. It never crossed her mind that he would want to be paid. Sarah had been under a lot of stress leading up to the wedding. She was dealing with vendors, seating arrangements, and last-minute cancellations, and she thought asking Jake to help was a way to lighten the load. In her mind, family helps family. That's just how it works. But she didn't consider that this favor was actually a major commitment of time and energy for Jake. She assumed he would be thrilled to be part of her special day without expecting anything in return. Great. Let's continue expanding the script, building on the previous sections to deepen the story, relationships, and emotional tension. Here's the next part of the expanded script. As the wedding day approached, Jake's anxiety grew. He was excited to do the job, no doubt, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was turning into something much bigger than just helping out his family. He had done weddings before, and he knew just how much work was involved, not just on the day of the event, but also afterward. Editing hundreds of photos, color correcting, making sure every shot was perfect. It could take days, even weeks of work. And the fact that Sarah hadn't even mentioned payment made him feel like his skills were being undervalued. Jake tried to give Sarah the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just overwhelmed with the wedding, and the money conversation had slipped her mind. After all, weddings are stressful, and Sarah has a lot on her plate. But as much as Jake wanted to avoid making things awkward, he knew he couldn't let this slide. If he didn't bring it up now, it would be even more uncomfortable later. So, a few days before the wedding, Jake sat down with Sarah. He tried to keep things casual, starting with how excited he was for her big day. But as soon as he brought up the topic of payment, the atmosphere shifted. "Hey, Aunt Sarah," Jake began, trying to sound as neutral as possible. "I've been thinking about the wedding photos. I've put together a pretty detailed plan for the day, and I just wanted to chat about compensation." Sarah looked surprised, maybe even a little confused. "Compensation?" she asked. "Jake, your family. I thought you were doing this as a favor." And just like that, the misunderstanding became painfully clear. Jake felt his stomach drop. He didn't want to argue with his aunt, but he also didn't want to be taken for granted. "Yeah, I get that we're family," Jake said carefully, "but I'm putting in a lot of time and effort into this. It's not just about showing up with a camera. There's prep work, editing, and hours of post-production involved. I really think I should be paid for that." Sarah's expression changed. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of disappointment. "Jake, I don't have the budget for that. I thought you'd want to do this as a way to support me. You're getting experience, and you'll have amazing photos for your portfolio. Isn't that enough?" And here's where things got really tense. Jake felt like he was caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, he loved his aunt and didn't want to sour their relationship over money. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the fact that he was being asked to work for free, something that would never happen in any other professional situation. Jake took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Aunt Sarah, I really appreciate the opportunity, but this is my job. I've spent a lot of time getting good at this, and I've invested in equipment so I can deliver high-quality work. I think it's only fair that I'm compensated, even if it's family." But Sarah wasn't having it. She crossed her arms and shook her head. "Jake, this is a wedding. It's not a corporate gig. You're supposed to be doing this out of love for your family. I can't believe you're asking me for money." Jake felt his frustration bubbling over. He didn't want to fight, but it was hard not to feel like his work, and by extension, he was being disrespected. "It's not about the money, Aunt Sarah. It's about valuing my time and skills. I wouldn't ask another photographer to shoot a wedding for free, and I don't think it's fair to ask me to do that just because we're related." The room went silent. For a moment, neither of them knew what to say. The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like a cloud over what was supposed to be a happy occasion. Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice quieter but still tinged with frustration. "Jake, I understand that you've worked hard to get where you are, but this is family. I never expected to have this conversation with you. I thought you'd be honored to help out." Jake felt a pang of guilt. He did want to help, but not at the expense of his self-worth. "I am honored," Jake said, his voice softer now, "but I also want to feel like what I'm doing matters, and that includes being compensated for my time. It's not about the money, it's about respect." The conversation reached its peak as both Sarah and Jake struggled to see eye to eye. Sarah felt blindsided. In her mind, this was a favor, a family helping family kind of deal. She had never thought of it as a business transaction, and now she felt hurt that Jake was treating it that way. "I can't believe you're putting money between us," Sarah said, her voice cracking a little. "This is my wedding, Jake. I thought you'd be excited to be part of it, not turning it into a negotiation." Jake winced at her words. This was exactly what he had feared. He didn't want to make it seem like he didn't care about her wedding or their family, but at the same time he couldn't back down on this. It wasn't just about this one gig. It was about the precedent it would set. If he didn't stand up for himself now, what would stop other family members from assuming he'd work for free in the future? "Aunt Sarah, I'm not trying to put money between us," Jake said, his tone firm but measured. "But I also have to stand up for myself. I love photography, and I love our family, but I can't keep doing this kind of work without being recognized for it. It's about fairness." The tension in the room was thick. Sarah stood there, arms still crossed, her face a mix of disappointment and frustration. She didn't want to see Jake's side of things, at least not in that moment. To her, this was supposed to be a happy occasion, and now it felt like business had intruded on a personal, emotional moment. As the day of the wedding drew closer, neither Jake nor Sarah could shake the discomfort of their confrontation. The family dynamic had shifted. At family gatherings, there was an unspoken tension between them, even though no one else seemed to notice. Jake, meanwhile, was stuck in a difficult position. He knew that he had to follow through with the wedding photography because he had promised, but now the excitement was gone. What should have been a joyful experience had turned into a professional obligation, and that left a sour taste in his mouth. When the wedding day finally arrived, Jake put on a brave face. He loved his aunt and wanted to do his best, despite the unresolved issue of payment. He snapped the photos as professionally as ever, but every shot reminded him of the conflict lurking beneath the surface. As the ceremony unfolded, Jake's mind kept returning to that conversation, wondering if he had done the right thing by bringing up the topic of payment or if he had made a bigger deal out of it than he should have. And then came the reception. After the cake was cut and the first dance was over, Jake found a quiet moment to approach Sarah. "Aunt Sarah," he said, his voice soft but resolute, "I know we had a difficult conversation the other day. I just want you to know that I'm doing this because I care about you and want your day to be special. But I also want us to talk about how we can find a fair solution after the wedding." Sarah sighed, clearly still uncomfortable with the conversation, but she nodded. "We'll talk after," she said. "Let's just get through the day." So what can we take away from this situation? Jake's story highlights a common dilemma many of us face when family and business collide. On one hand, there's the desire to help out those we love without turning everything into a transaction. But on the other hand, there's the reality that skilled work, whether it's photography, graphic design, or any other professional service, has value. When family members assume that their connection entitles them to free labor, it can lead to resentment, misunderstandings, and even fractured relationships. For Jake, the issue wasn't just about money, it was about being respected for his work. And for Sarah, the issue wasn't about avoiding payment. It was about her expectation that family favors shouldn't come with a price tag. Both of them had valid perspectives, but their failure to communicate those perspectives clearly before the wedding led to a painful confrontation that could have been avoided. This story serves as a reminder to all of us, when it comes to mixing family and business, clear communication is key. Whether you're the one offering the service or the one requesting it, having an open and honest conversation about expectations before emotions get involved is essential. It's not about being greedy or ungrateful. It's about ensuring that everyone feels valued, respected, and heard. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a similar situation where family and money created tension? Maybe you've been asked to do something for free because we're family, or maybe you've had to ask for compensation from someone close to you. Drop your stories in the comments below. I'm sure many of us can relate to this kind of tricky situation. And if you found this story engaging, don't forget to check out our other video on navigating family dynamics and finances. Trust me, there's a lot more to unpack in these kinds of situations. See you in the next video.